So you're in Tuscany or Bordeaux and you're having this great wine and you're almost sure that you can't get it at the local liquor store back home. How do you take more than a bottle or two back home with you? Can you import a case? And how do you go about that? Is it expensive? Is there a lot of legal red tape? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore tonight on the Sunday Sipper Club. I'm Natalie McLean, editor of Canada's largest wine review site, and we gather here every Sunday at 6 p.m. to talk to the most interesting people in the world of wine. Now, before I introduce our guest fully, in the comments below, let me know yes or no. Are you interested in how to import a wine into this country? Have you ever gone traveling and wondered how can you do it? I know personally I am, and I'm going to refresh the Facebook comments here. I've never done it other than taking, one or two bottles home with me and, what the legal allowable amount is in your suitcase, say. So I see we are broadcasting live, which is terrific. Oh, Dave Head is here. Oh, yes, he says. He wonders how to import wine. Dave is a real wine advocate. There's Rochelle Connor. Looking forward to these tips tonight. Welcome to you all. Okay, so as I said, just post yes or no. Are you curious about how to import wine into the country? Stephen Andrews joins us, Jen Havers, Stephen Andrews, yes, okay, and Beverly Allison. Excellent. Guys, welcome, welcome, and Happy New Year, I should say. It's been a long break, but a refreshing one, and I hope you all had a great holiday. All right, so our guest this evening has been hosting an extremely popular seminar entitled, appropriately, How to Import Wine for Pleasure and Profit. He's been hosting it since 1993, and he's had rave reviews from both participants as well as from media outlets like the Globe and Mail, Toronto Life, CBC Radio, and many others. He's been involved in all aspects of brand management and agency management in the wine industry, and he really knows what he's talking about when it comes to importing wines. He's been an advisor to many of the governments, like Government for France and Mexico, South Africa, Australia, on how to import their wines into Canada. And he is going to share all those tips with us tonight. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation, and he joins me live now from his home in Toronto. Welcome to the Sunday Sipper Club, Charles Stephen Trenholm. How are you?
Thank you very much, Natalie McLean.
All right. And I'm pronouncing this because I know you go by Charles Trenholm in the industry, especially when you're hosting these seminars, but we've known each other a long time, and I've called you Stephen, which is, I believe, your middle name.
That's right, and the name that friends know me by, for the most part. So,
okay.
So it's a bit of a story, but we won't go through it here.
Well, maybe at the end of the conversation. We'll see.
Oh, sure.
All right, Stephen. So how did you get involved in importing wine? What drew you to that aspect of the wine industry?
Well, it's a story you can imagine I've told many times. But the heart of it, I was finishing up my undergraduate work, and a friend of mine said, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. At this point, I just want to graduate and have done with it." And he said, you know a lot about wine and really like wine. You should get into the wine business. And it was like an epiphany. It was like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. Now, it took me a year because I didn't know anything about the business at all, but it took me a year to find my first job. It was a small company that was willing to take me on because I was willing to work for very little money. As often is the case, people who want to make a career change or want to get into an industry were prepared to make little sacrifices. But, again, that was almost 40 years ago. And, I'm very grateful for the initial opportunity. And from there, I've, made a career of it.
Ah, terrific. Excellent. So Sam joins us from BC. I'm glad you like the topic. Paul Hallander is in Virginia. Laurie Kilmartin's in Ottawa. Elaine Bruce in Calgary. You'd like to learn more? Excellent, folks. And remember, I can only see 5 comments at a time, then they stream off like the stock ticker tape or whatever. So keep posting your comments as we go along. So Stephen, tell me, why would someone want to learn about this topic?
Well, as your listeners will attest, it's a fascinating industry. I mean, wine is a fascinating topic. So, we're involved in it, we enjoy it, we share it. And, obviously there's a business out there as well. So, people who have a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, perhaps, see it not only as a source of enjoyment, but maybe perhaps a source of a career or a source of income, so to speak.
Terrific. Wow. Jean-Marc Perron, Happy New Year. Excellent. And Stephen Andrews says, I need to import wine to Aruba and not lose my shirt. He spends a lot of time in Aruba. But we're going to focus on importing wine into Canada tonight, Stephen, but do feel free to post questions regarding that. So, Stephen, now, is the seminar that you teach, is it very technical, or what's kind of the heart of what you're getting at in this seminar?
Well, as you can imagine, Natalie, it's a day-long seminar.
Okay.
There's a tremendous amount of information disseminated during the seminar and then following. But you can't possibly teach someone everything there is to know about a business in one day. So
Sure.
essentially, in the one-day seminar, I provide an overview of how the industry is organized. So I outline who are the stakeholders, how liquor boards function, how suppliers operate, the relationship between the importer agent and the supplier, the relationship between the supplier and the liquor board, how products are marketed, how products are priced, these sort of things. So people go away from the seminar with a kind of a basic understanding of how the industry works.
Right. Okay. And so for Gwen is here. Hello, Gwen. And John Young asks, how easy is it to import wine for your own restaurant?
Well, you can certainly import wine for your own restaurant as what's referred to as a private import.
Okay.
So if you can find a winery that isn't represented already, and that winery is prepared to ship wine to a liquor control board, then the liquor control board on your behalf will place an order with the supplier, and then the supplier will ship the wine to the liquor control board, who will in turn test it, price it, and deliver it to you. So it's not difficult. Most liquor boards have a facility to do these, as I said, private imports. But the first thing you want to look at is that winery already represented? And if they are, then the agent will do that work for you.
Okay, excellent. And Stephen, I should just note, I know I told you to ignore us on camera, but you can look into the eye of your camera.
Oh, okay.
I think I got you scared of looking at the computer at all, but you're giving some great answers here.
Okay.
So for consumers, let's take that typical scenario. I'm in Tuscany. I love this Chianti. I can't get it at home. What's the first thing I do I want a case of it. So what's involved? Take me from that time to getting that case at my doorstep, I hope, or somehow.
Right. Well, I'll answer the question and then I'll disappoint you.
Okay.
The first thing you require basically is the contact information for the winery.
Okay.
And then once you return, you can go to the liquor board and provide the liquor board with the contact information for the winery and the wine or wines that you would like to import. The liquor board on your behalf will contact the winery, will determine if they're prepared to ship the wine to the liquor board. The liquor board will take care of all the logistics, pick it up at the winery, and bring it back to the province involved. And the liquor board will also request from the supplier their net export price, so the price that they'll sell it to the liquor board, providing that the liquor board picks it up at their location.
Okay.
So it's a process that goes on every day. The problem from an individual's perspective is that the liquor boards have contracts with transportation companies, freight forwarders.
Okay.
And in these contracts, there's a minimum case quantity required in order for that freight forwarder to provide the liquor board with a quotation for freight. All right?
Okay.
So let's say you're in Tuscany and you want to bring back some wine. So the wines from Tuscany, if they're picked up from the supplier, the freight, I think, is about $10 a case. Mm-hmm. And that's irrespective of whether it's a case of 12 or 6, which are the standard case sizes for wines in 750 milliliter bottles. However, out of Tuscany, for instance, the minimum quantity I believe, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 or 20 cases. So as an individual, you might be a little hard pressed to need or to want 15 cases of wine. Now, you can also consolidate the order. So for instance, you could buy 5 cases of Chianti and 5 cases of Vernaccia and 5 cases of Brunello and 5 cases of Maremma or whatever, provided that that particular supplier has all those wines available. So you could kind of consolidate, so to speak, an order in order to get that freight rate.
And that'd be just from one producer, one winery, or could you combine imports from several wineries in that region?
No, it would have to be from one supplier because, of course, what you're looking at is the freight cost from that supplier to the liquor store closest to the customer.
Okay.
When I say that, when you, as an individual or a restaurant, for instance, when you place a private import order, the product will be shipped, if you don't want to pick it up in Toronto, will be shipped to the liquor store nearest you.
Okay.
So, so that's a lot of handling when you think about it. So as you can imagine, it's not really in a freight forwarder's and the liquor board's interest to just pick up one case. Right. I mean, you've been to Tuscany, right? There's all these winding roads and hills you have to go up. So to send a truck, let's say from Florence, all the way to some little winery in Greve, and then back to Florence, and then that in turn has to get from Florence to Livorno on the coast, and then on a ship and everything else. And there's so much handling. So for one case, they'll do a case, but the problem is that the freight on that one case would be the same as the freight on 15 cases. So you might have to do 15. So that's
okay.
The disincentive.
That puts it in perspective. And I'm just going to take a moment here, folks, to, if you're enjoying this conversation, please share or comment, ask questions. I'm going to be picking up the questions as we go along here. And Stephen has generously agreed to offer a gift certificate off $100 off his seminar that he hosts in Toronto for someone who shares the video tonight and makes comments. So if you're interested in this content and you believe others would be too, please do share it. So Neil Phillips says, I know Neil's in the business. All POs are actually issued by the LCBO, or as the French say, la monopole. Yes. Mm-hmm. Dave Head says, does the LCBO ship temperature controlled? Is the wine temperature controlled?
Yes, yeah. At certain times of year, obviously, crossing the North Atlantic in the middle of the winter, the containers either have to be insulated or they're what they're called reefers, which are a heated container. So there's a cost that will be passed on if indeed it has to be shipped in winter. But again, the liquor board contracts ships huge quantities of wine, so they have probably the most economical freight rates anywhere.
Sure. And I think I've heard, I don't know if this is still the case, they're the single largest buyer of wine in the world, the LCBO?
Well, it's, what is it, there's statistics and damn lies or something.
Yes, Benjamin Disraeli.
Something like that. But I think as a matter of fact, it's actually the SAQ, which is the biggest importer of wine.
Okay.
Whereas the Liquor Control Board is the biggest importer of alcoholic beverages. So there's this subtle distinction.
Okay.
But,
okay, go ahead.
Again, it's just a number. Who knows, really?
Sure. And related to that then, Stephen, Gwen asks, is it any easier to import wine in Quebec than it is in Ontario?
The Quebec, the SAQ certainly has a private import division as well, and it's quite dynamic. So I don't know if it's any easier or any more difficult, but I think it's a fairly well-used system. I live in Toronto, Canada. I work more or less exclusively with the Liquor Control Board, although throughout my career I've had some exposure to the other Liquor Control Board. So I know a little bit about what's going on in the other provinces, but I'm not going to suggest for a moment that I'm an expert on each province, but there is some private import facility available in every province in Canada.
Okay, great. And Neil Phillips says, very gracious, Stephen, your answers. And Beverly, yes, I know we're very Canadian-centric tonight. She's in California, but next week will definitely be for you, and stay tuned for what that topic is. Stephen Andrews, Costco. Not sure what the question is there, Stephen. But Dave had said, oh, it's Mark Twain who made that quote. I thought it was Benjamin Disraeli. Anyway, thank you for the correction, Dave. So, Stephen, who is your biggest customer? Who comes to this seminar? Is it sommeliers wanting to import for restaurants? Is it people who want to become wine agents? Or is it consumers who have this real passion and want to collect and build their cellars?
Well, with each seminar, at the beginning of the seminar, I ask people to stand up and introduce themselves to the group and to give me some idea what they would like as a takeaway for the day. And, over 25 years, the groups almost always break down into the same percentages. A third of the group are people, that have had a long career, a long successful career, but they're looking for something to do in the retirement, essentially. Or they've been downsized for one reason or another. They're in the 50s, early 60s. They still have some working years ahead of them, and they would like to do something. So that's one group, and that almost represents a third of the people that are showing up. Okay. The other third are people that, interestingly, have some connection already to the beverage alcohol industry. They have a relative, a brother-in-law, who owns a winery or a distillery or a craft brewery somewhere in the world, and when they visited, their relative says, oh, maybe you can help us find a market in Canada or, in a specific province. And then there's a third group, and these are generally people who are kind of mid-career, and they're doing quite well in their career, and their careers cause them to travel quite regularly and often to wine-producing areas. I had a fellow who was a director of Facebook, and so he was going to California on a very regular basis and loved wine and was finding all these wineries, and when his shares vested, he wanted to set up an agency. So that's a third of the people that they don't really have a business kind of ambition, but they're finding all these wines and they want a strategy for bringing them back.
Okay. Wow. Interesting profiles. It's nice. It's interesting to hear those details behind it. So Neil Phillips clarifies the largest wine buyer in the world, Costco. Okay. Dea Delvino Wine Journey says, I have heard that there is a danger of your wines being cooked during overseas transit during summer months. Are you aware of this being a regular problem at all? Sounds like it's not when it's the LCBO, but maybe in other cases, Stephen?
Generally speaking, the logistics is a really interesting, it's almost a science. And, when you think of getting a case of wine, like where's the furthest place on the planet from Ontario? It's maybe like Perth, Australia. Yet wine seems to get from Perth, Australia to Ontario in perfectly good condition. And wine, of course, they're using heated or refrigerated containers. These ships move quite quickly. So, it takes some time for, unless it's really extreme conditions, for wine to be cooked or oxidized. So it's generally not a problem.
Okay.
When you think about it, there's very little, quality control issues with any products through any liquor control boards. One, they have good labs, but still, there's just a lot of know-how at all levels of the supply chain. So it's not a problem, generally speaking.
Oh, good. Great. Stephen Andrews says, I looked into this years ago and the taxes were terrible. Is that still true, the tax you would be charged trying to import these wines?
Well, the tax as a part of the total markup that's applied by the liquor board is very high, and it's getting higher. In fact, in April, they're going to increase another 2%, and then the feds are going to increase duty and excise as well, about 2%. So, death and taxes, I think that's also Mark Twain. The only thing for sure in life, right? Death and taxes, somebody. Yeah. But, it's unavoidable. And certainly they have taxes in other jurisdictions as well. So, you just have to deal with it.
Right. So would your, again, the answer may be not simple, but would you advise this as a means for saving money or making money? If you're not going to be a wine agency, you're just a consumer with a real habit who wants to collect, is this worth pursuing the importing?
Well, it'll provide you with an opportunity to, perhaps find or get some wines that aren't generally available.
Okay.
I mean, collectors by their nature want things that other people don't have, right?
Right.
You have a Monet, or that fellow, that Saudi prince who bought a Leonardo, right? He's got something. He was prepared to pay for whatever because he knew he would be the only one who had that. So it's if you're passionate about it, you can get something that somebody doesn't have. There's some bragging rights there. And also, as we all know, those of us who travel with wine, there's nothing that rekindles a memory better than a bottle of wine you've had when you've traveled.
Right.
I mean, how romantic is that on an anniversary to share a bottle of wine that you and your partner had at overlooking the Adriatic in a little taverna in Greece or something like that, or in a castle on the Rhine, or, a top hotel in California.
Absolutely. And I think that's why people are so intrigued about importing wine. That's a very good comment. Lori, Stephen, in your opinion, are there countries that are more difficult to import from than others, even with the LCBO involved? Good question, Lori.
Well, yeah, certainly there's countries, I mean, that produce wine that aren't kind of big on our radar, like Moldova or Georgia or these sort of places. But it's, like case in point, earlier this, we're already in the new year. So it was last year, I was involved with bringing in some wine from India. So, one of the things we had to do before we presented to the liquor board was get a quote for freight, which the liquor board did for us. And then we were able to find an appropriate pricing, price for the product. But, it came from Mumbai, India. So, there's really, no place that you can't get wine from. But, again, if there's other issues, of course, if language facility, the freight rate might be incredibly high. Fortunately, Mumbai is a port. There's a lot of things being shipped out of it, so it wasn't so much of a problem. But, I don't know, Kyrgyzstan or something, that might be, the freight rate out of there might be prohibitively expensive. For instance, I have a client who has a organic mezcal that comes out of Mexico. And the freight rate on that, because it's in this obscure location in Mexico, and I guess you have to have Bandito insurance or something, it's like $35 a case.
Wow.
So that's a lot,
Sure.
And that, of course, is marked up, which causes the product to be kind of quite expensive.
Wow. You bring up Mexico. I was just in Cancun for a vacation with my family, and tasting all these Mexican wines we cannot get. It was interesting. We only get one or two here. That alone made me wonder in relation to our topic. Roger Koffel, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, Roger. What is a typical agency markup? I guess once they get the wine imported into Canada, he's asking, or Ontario. I suppose that differs, but is there any sort of general answer you could give there, Stephen?
Yeah, that's a very good question, of course, because that's kind of answers where's the money. Generally speaking, agents are loath to tell you how much commission they're earning. But as a rule of thumb, kind of the starting point might be about 10%. And then added to that would be an advertising and promotion allowance, or an A&P allowance, of an additional 10%, because you need some funds to promote a product. But again, your commission is going to be added to the supplier's net export price, and then that, of course, is going to be marked up. So the more commission you earn, the more that will increase the retail price through the markup. Now, the markup formula works in a way that a small increase with cheaper products will make the cheaper product a little more expensive. But with the more expensive products, because the commission is such a small part of the price, it doesn't have a dramatic impact. So generally speaking, with more expensive products, you can actually earn a little more commission without seriously impacting the retail price. You know, for instance, if after you've done the markup of, let's say, I don't know, an Amarone, and you've done all the calculations, you've already added your 10% commission, and the retail price comes out at $46.95. Well, you probably think, well, you know, that's kind of a nowhere price. If somebody's prepared to pay $46, they'll probably pay $49. Mm-hmm. So in that instance, you can add a little more commission, boost your price up to $49.95. You've also boosted up your A&P allowance, so you have a little more money to spend to promote the product.
Okay.
And that's really critical in this market, that you have money to promote your product, because there's certain penalties that agents pay for products that don't sell properly or don't sell.
What are those, the penalties? You mean being delisted by the liquor store? Or?
Well, for instance, if you get a product in the LCBO through vintages, mm-hmm. you have 60 days from the date of release to sell 75% of the inventory.
Wow.
And in the event that you don't sell 75% of the inventory, the Liquor Board in vintages has the right to discount the remaining inventory by 20% and to deduct that amount of the discount from your supplier's invoice.
Wow. Okay.
So, you know, it doesn't happen all that often. It happens to everybody sooner or later for a number of reasons, but thankfully it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, and you have to be aware of that. Also, if you're on the general list, you have sales quotas to meet. And if the product doesn't meet that quota, again, you've signed off against an understanding that the product can be delisted to encourage quick sell-through. And your supplier or the agent is going to pay for that at the end of the day.
So promoting those products is really key.
Yeah, nothing sells itself, you know.
No.
I mean, even things like, I don't know what, you know, the classified grows and all these iconic wines. Well, you don't think they're being promoted, but they're being promoted in very subtle ways through public relations and that sort of thing. Whereas mass merchandise brands are being promoted with discounts and bonus air miles and value-added items that are put on the bottles and shelf extenders and displays and these sort of things.
Questions coming in here. Stephen Andrews, for personal consumption, I would have bought wines from importers. Neil agrees. Me too, Stephen. I buy a lot of wine that way. Just a challenge, as you have to buy them in case lots. Beverly is asking you, Stephen, what is your favorite wine and from which country, India and beyond?
Oh, dear. Again, a question that I've been asked frequently. And for me, you know, I've been in this business for a long time. And it's a great business. Don't get me wrong. It's a fantastic business. But the single most thing that interests me is the phenomenal and inexhaustible variety in which wine is available. That's what makes it so fascinating.
Yes.
There's just so many different wines, so many different vintages. Wine evolves, you know, through the aging process. A food and wine pairing can make all the difference in the world. But if the question was asked or posed in this way, they say, you know, Charles Stephen, we're going to send you to a deserted island for 2 weeks. You can only take one type of wine. So what would you take? And my answer to that is always, I would take champagne. And the reason I would take champagne is it's incredibly versatile in terms of food pairing, incredibly versatile. And, you know, it's really hard you have to be really depressed to be depressed if you're sitting there on a deserted island drinking champagne.
Right. You know. Go with those stray crabs, the coconuts, whatever. It could handle everything. And related to that a little bit, but closer to the wine importing, are there particular regions of the world right now that are really hot, trendy for people wanting to import wines from those regions? Like in your seminars, are you seeing people say, okay, let's focus on this region? Like what is the inside scoop here?
Well, you know, I mean, for practical purposes, it's always good to follow, you know, emerging markets or growing trends. So, of course, you know, generally speaking, Italy, specifically Tuscany and Veneto, are really hot. California is very hot. Chile and Argentina are still doing very well, but there's a very narrow price range, that people are prepared to pay for Chilean and Argentinian wines. Australia, it's kind of like it's neither here nor there. I mean, it was big, obviously. It's still fairly big in volume, but it doesn't seem to have legs for growth at the moment. New Zealand, of course. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be any end to this Sauvignon Blanc thirst that everybody has. But again, it's a fairly mature category. Lots of suppliers, lots of product in the market. I've noticed, these suppliers are getting very aggressive, and the only tool that they have to play, is discounting. So there's a lot of New Zealand Sauvignon being discounted.
Yeah, that's interesting though, Stephen. Like I have a background in product management at Procter & Gamble on the food brands like Crisco and Pringles and Betty Crocker. And there was always an avoidance of promoting via price, because you train people just to buy on deal and then they move to the next brand. They're not developing real brand loyalty, was the thought. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think what we're finding, with these LTOs, we are conditioning consumers to buy the bargains.
Right.
So when you put a product on a discount, an LTO, limited time offer, you get a tremendous lift in volume.
Yes.
But, the follow-on period, you see your sales deteriorate.
And I've heard they can even go flat again. Like I could understand if it was a sampling program to get it out there and build loyalty, but it's almost like they look for the next deal.
Well, I think people are conditioning. I do exactly the same thing. I go online at the beginning of the month. I look what's on LTO. I think, I'd like some of that. And then I order it online and I get a case and I drink it over the course of the month. And then towards the end of the month, the ones I like, I order more of it.
Right.
My friend Andrew Von Tugman from Vontora, he has the Radio Boca wine. And he had that on a very generous LTO. But sometimes what happens is the LTO overperforms, so you not only exhaust your projected inventory, you exhaust your follow-on inventory. So the next month you don't have any product to sell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like, just shoot me now.
And you were talking about wines being promoted. Does the LCBO and other liquor boards, are they demanding of agencies and wineries, show us your marketing plan beyond like advertising and food and drink or whatever? Are they requiring people, agents and wineries, to be out there showing marketing plans or investments?
Well, when you're submitting a product for a potential new listing, they ask for a marketing plan.
Okay.
So that's part of the decision-making process on behalf of the buyers. Now, once the product is listed, the agents, in fact, compete for these in-store merchandising programs. You can do everything you'd like, on premise, and in the market, but you have to compete for in-store promotions.
Okay.
So, of course, you see at Christmas period, it's only the big brands, the big high volume, expensive brands that get the promotion.
Right.
Whereas in January and February, there's not so many brands on promotion. They're generally, less viable, or not less viable, but not the A-list brands, let's say.
Sure. Everybody's cutting back and trying to diet and
well, and they know there's not that much traffic in the store, and
absolutely. All right. Is there any market for what I call wacky wines? Not sure what you mean by that. But I guess esoteric or strange little birds of wines. I don't know exactly what you mean, Stephen, but do you think there's a market for those real niche wines?
There's been lots of history, and you and I have had them all. All these kind of, all the Australian critter wines, for instance. You'll remember, what was it called? The New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc called Caspian.
A gooseberry bush, yeah.
The Fat Bastard. There's all kinds of novelty labeling. There's all kinds of fruit and wine blends and that sort of thing, wine, cream, wine liqueurs kind of things. And one never knows. This is a credible market. So, People a lot of consumers are prepared to look at a lot of things, and this whole millennial cohort looks at wine completely different than I do. They're prepared to buy all kinds of different things. They don't have the same biases that we came into wine buying with. They don't have pretense. They're kind of prepared to look at everything. I mean, look at Barefoot Cellars at a gala, a huge brand, but again, it's targeted towards a certain demographic.
Absolutely. Stephen, I can't believe how quickly the time has gone. For people who would like to take your seminar, how can they find you online? What's the best way to contact you?
Well, I think you can either do a search, with the seminar, importing wine. It's also with beer and spirits for pleasure and profit. Or I have a website with a contact, and it's quite simple. It's Can Market Wine is one word.
Okay.
CanMarketWine.com. So that has my email address in the contact and my telephone number and so forth. So
awesome. And I'm also posting a blog post. Well, I have already on our little chat before this. I'll be posting this chat as well as your contact information for people who are looking for that. And as I said, folks, if you have really enjoyed this conversation, please share it, because Stephen has generously offered a $100 gift certificate off his seminar, which we will draw for next week. So if you're watching the replay, you can still qualify for this. And of course, I'm going to announce the winner from our last session before the holiday break. So stay with me, and I've got a few other announcements to make, so you don't want to disappear yet. But Charles Stephen Trenholm, to bring it full circle here, thank you so much. Great insights. I mean, this really is a full day and beyond of information. But it was really good to get some of the highlighted, top line tips and what's involved. It really helpful, Stephen. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And thank you very much for this opportunity, Natalie. I really appreciate it. You've been very supportive over the years, and you have a great product in Natalie McLean and in Nat Decants and all the things you do. So you're very well respected in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. That's very kind. Okay, well, I'll say goodnight for now, Stephen, but we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Great. Thanks. Good night.
Okay, good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, I am going to stay here. Now, there's a few things I need to do, including announce last week's winner, and that last week. Before Christmas, it feels like ages ago. My goodness. But we had Peter Lehman wines, if you remember. So tonight's winner is getting a premium bottle of Australian Shiraz from Peter Lehman. So hang on with me here. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a couple things. For those of you, I know a number of you are members of my course, The Quick Start to Get Wine Smart, which we are relaunching January 31st. But those of you who've already joined, I'm adding a bonus tasting after the Sunday Sipper Club every week inside our private Facebook group, where we do tutorials and share wines and tips. So at 7 o'clock tonight, we are going to do a structured tasting of California Zinfandel. So we're going to taste a number of different Zinfandels, pair them with some food, vote on our favorites, but it'll be a good way for you to develop your tasting skills by comparing such similar wines. And of course, the replay of that is always available to you inside our course area. So I'm looking forward. When I wrap this up, I'll be hopping over to our private Facebook group to do our tasting there. So let me just check in. Dave says I don't have much of a tan. No, I'm white as a lily. I stay in the shade and I'm covered in towels, and then my face looks like I've done a face mask of white. I put on so much sunscreen, Dave. It's not funny because I burn very easily. Neil Phillips says, thanks, Stephen. Isn't he gracious? He's such a well-articulate man on this topic and others. Culture too. Good info, says Jean-Marc Parent. Glad you enjoyed it. Stephen Andrews, Jean-Marc, have to go to Lings. Okay, not sure what that is. I know there's football going on today too. In any case, the winner of the Peter Lehman Shiraz from, it was 3 weeks ago, wasn't it? is Stephen Andrews. And I'm glad you're here tonight, Stephen. So drum roll. I thought I would get some sound effects by now, but I haven't. So I'll have to work on that. I'm just getting back in the swing of things with this broadcast tonight. So, but it feels good to be back with you all. And as always, I so appreciate you sharing a bit of your Sunday with me to chat, to comment. And I will jump back into the comments after this is over and after I've done my tasting with my course members. If you're interested in the course, please type the word course below, and I can always send you information on that if you're interested in joining us. We are going to do weekly tastings every Sunday after the Sunday Sipper Club, in addition to the course itself. So that's it. Congrats, Stephen Andrew. Well, and thank you. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Neil. All right, good. All right, guys. So, Stephen, I'll be in touch with you for your shipping address. And that's it for this week. Next week, I should always say, we are going to have Elise Lambert, who won the award of Canada's Best Sommelier at the Sommelier competition. She went on to place well in the Worlds. She's a Master Sommelier, I believe. I think it's Master Sommelier, not Master Wine. She is a dynamo from Quebec. And we are going to have a great conversation next week here, 6 p.m., as we do every week, Sundays at 6 Eastern, Toronto, New York time, Facebook Live, YouTube via live stream, and Twitter via Periscope. So I will see you next week. Post what you learned below, comment, share, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care.